This is Illuminate, the podcast about men with good hearts, open minds, and a desire to make the world better. Welcome to Illuminate. I'm your host, Chris Tidrick, and I'm here with Steve Walker. Steve is a certified transformational life coach, meditation teacher, and host of the podcast Integrity and Joy. A former U.S. diplomat, activist, and educator, Steve has been helping people create meaningful, lasting change in their personal and work lives through integrity and mindfulness for over 20 years. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks a lot. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I'd like to always start these episodes by diving into what I think is this critical piece of all human beings, and that's what is your motivation? Like, what makes you tick? Where do you find purpose? What drives you?
Yeah, I'm kind of fortunate in that I've always had that. And it's about making a difference. I credit my mom. She was a big fan of John F. Kennedy.
Hmm.
And we were poor, and we at one point had to sell all of our stuff basically. But one of the things that we had everywhere was this like kind of blown glass vase with a bust of John F. Kennedy, and around his head said from his first inaugural, or his only inaugural, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And my dad had fought in World War II, and like my parents instilled in me this idea that we get like tremendous rights and opportunities in this country, and they come with responsibilities. And part of the responsibility is like help make it better. And so for me, like that, and I think also being adopted, I've got this fear of abandonment that's in there, and I think sometimes people with a fear of abandonment, there's a people pleaser, I have to justify my worth kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that reinforced it too, right? That there's part of me that's like trying to justify my existence and to prove that I'm lovable by making a difference, by doing good things. And which is in the end great. Like as long as it doesn't become too obsessed with external validation, it's been a great thing. And it was weird when I was like in college and just out of college, because most of my friends were like, I'm going to go make money. I'm going to be a doctor or a business person or whatever. And I was like, no, like, am I weird for that? But so that's what's driven me my whole life, which is great. I mean, because in the end, we know, right, that what gives you purpose, making a difference in the lives of others, relationships, like that's actually the secret.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your life journey. You mentioned Kennedy as a child, so that sort of places us in a certain era of our history. But give me um, the high points of what your journey has been.
High points. Well, I'd say a couple of things. I'd say starting in high school, my childhood wasn't great, and there were a lot of challenges. We moved a lot, but my high school wasn't great. But I had this biology teacher and a guidance counselor who were pivotal. And I think, in particular, like empowering me to believe in myself and treating me like an adult and giving me adult like opportunities, including to go to college early, which was in and of itself like a great opportunity. And then I'd say also at that time, I really happened upon, because of a friend, a karate studio, and I got into the martial arts, which I studied and taught for 20 years or more. And that also impacted me in so many ways, including introducing me to mindfulness. And so my meditation practice, and now I'm a meditation teacher, like that goes back to being 16 years old in the karate studio and learning how to meditate, and being like, oh, wow, this is a game changer, right?
Yeah.
So I'd say that. And then, in college, I went to Brandeis University, incredible opportunities there, including to get an internship at the State Department, which then led to me going into the Foreign Service with the U.S. State Department and becoming a diplomat, which was, at the age of 22 to be a U.S. diplomat. Are you kidding me? I mean, it's kind of crazy when I think about it.
Where in the world did you get to serve?
Uh, First tour was Monterrey, Mexico. I did a lot of work on visas, both tourist, non-immigrant visas, and immigrant visas. And then I also did American Citizen Services, so a lot of prison visits and stuff like that.
Okay.
22, 23 years old. I'm in
Yeah.
Mexico visiting prisons and, dealing with corrupt wardens and death squads and all that. And, bandits trying to force us off the roads. I mean, it's like crazy stories. And, but that was great. And then Moscow, which is what I was a Soviet studies person in college and grad school. And so I went into the Foreign Service hoping to get to Moscow. And that was my second tour, which was amazing. And it was during the collapsing of communism. So I got to see and be a part of a lot of incredible history, actually. And then,
That had to have been so spectacular. I almost want to spend an entire hour diving in and
yeah,
talking to you about that. But
we could.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I literally I was the people who started all this stuff in 1989 were these like 20 people in Lithuania who started protests for independence, and everybody thought they were crazy. And I happened to meet the leader of it, like right when it was starting, and was like, "Oh my God, these people are for real."
yeah.
And that's what triggers it all, right? So that kind of thing, tearing down the Berlin Wall with my own two hands, literally hammer and chisel. I mean, it's unbelievable. Um, And then I was an intelligence analyst in Washington. So I was writing intelligence briefs for the Secretary of State and other top people um, on what was going on in Europe at the time. And that was also a historic time. The collapse of the Soviet Union finally, and the reunification of Germany, and the creation of the EU, and the wars in the Balkans, and all that. And then I was a fellow at Columbia University for a year, and that was extraordinary. With a bunch of other like so-called up-and-coming leaders from around the world that they brought together. And then I went back to work on the genocide in Bosnia at the State Department. And I ended up quitting. There were three of us who quit publicly in 1993 to protest what we believed was our complicity in the genocide.
Wow.
And that became a big deal. It was like front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and all that stuff. And which for a faceless bureaucrat taught to be afraid of the media and the press, that was intimidating as hell at first. But that experience became transformational. My company is called Integrity and Joy, and part of it is that like that moment of having to really confront career versus values, and who am I, and what does my integrity mean. Uh, that was I think there's like before then
Yeah.
and after then, and then I ended up helping to create and lead the Save Bosnia activism campaign, which eventually helped force President Clinton to intervene to stop the genocide. I did that for 5 years, and then I went into teaching. And that, I really felt like after the dip, diplomat thing and the Bosnia thing, like, I by that point in my life, I'm like, I feel like I've lived 9 lives and I've been lucky. Like, whatever, the rest is gravy, and I'm never going to come close to anything that meaningful or purposeful. Well, teaching was my real passion and my real purpose in life.
And where did you teach?
In Chappaqua, New York, ironically, the year after I started teaching there, Bill Clinton moves there, like a mile from the school, like following me. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, right. And anyways, but I taught there for 25 years, and it changed my life. And I think the program that I was primarily in and ended up running changed the lives of a lot of kids. I mean, it was extraordinary.
Oh,
Absolutely.
is this at the undergrad level or at the grad level?
It was high school.
It was high school. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Fantastic.
wanted to, when I
Yeah.
decided to go into teaching, I became very clear to me just immediately that it needed to be high school, because I feel like that's where like you really like your brain's starting to come alive and you're
Yeah.
trying to figure out who you are, and you can really turn people onto themselves and things to study and skills and all that. And Jean Kirkpatrick, I don't know if you remember Jean Kirkpatrick, who was President Reagan's UN ambassador. I became very close to her during the Bosnia stuff. And she loved teaching. She was a professor at Georgetown. And I went to talk to her about it. And I'm like, hey, Gene, I think I'm going into teaching. She goes, oh, you'd be great. You should totally do that, undergrad or graduate school. I'm like, no, high school. And she goes, what?
Yeah, no, that
Yeah, that's where the action is. She's like, that's such a waste for you. And I'm like, no. I want to turn people on. By the time they get to you, they know what they're interested in, whatever. I want to light the fire in them.
and I think in some ways that's even more important today because I know when I was in high school, my sense of global awareness was not high, right? I mean, I probably had more awareness than most, but we still were in sort of an information bubble. Now
Right.
high school kids have
Right.
access to everything all the time.
Yeah.
And so many of these kids have a worldview set in their brains before they get to college, if they go to college. And so being able to help them with that at a high school level, I think would be really exciting.
Yeah. It was phenomenal every day. I mean, it was exhausting. It's a tough job being a teacher, but it was extraordinary. And I had the great blessing to, spend most of my career in this innovative lab school where like we were charged with being innovators and figuring out what's
Yeah.
the best practice for teaching and learning. And, so we were creating like social justice programs and doing new ways of grading and feedback for kids. And it was a place of love and wonderment. I mean, it was really, really extraordinary.
And so how long did you do that? Or are you still doing that?
25 years teaching. And then about 2.5 years ago, I had this epiphany while I was traveling in Scotland that I needed to start a life coaching business. And I had done this on the side, and it had become a big part of the job as a teacher. In our program, we were effectively like mentors or coaches for the kids, and had been trained in a bunch of different modalities for coaching. And I'd always, for some reason, like talked myself out of doing it more seriously on this side,
Yeah.
kind of imposter syndrome. And which is kind of crazy given everything that I've done. But like I'm as vulnerable to that crap from my the 12-year-old self
Yeah.
that's talking to me all the time. And so, but I had this epiphany, like, of course I should do this, and I was looking to bring, in some ways, to bring more purpose to my personal life because I realized that my kids had grown and uh and I'd been married and divorced twice and I was single and it was coming out of COVID and I'm like, boy, almost all my purpose in life is at school and that's not healthy.
Right.
So I thought, wow, I can help people, I can help more people, and I can bring more purpose to my personal life. Well, it started to take off pretty quickly, including with like people around the world as clients and and then I realized I haven't brought more purpose to my personal life. I have expanded the walls of my professional life more into my personal life. So I had a good laugh at that. But I was like, okay, that didn't accomplish that mission. But I realized that I could do this full time and I could do it from anywhere. And so over the next couple of months, I gave myself some time to think about it. But I woke up on New Year's Day 2 years ago and was like, what the hell am I waiting for? And so I took an early retirement from teaching and I moved back here to the Boston area because I hadn't lived near family since college. And my oldest daughter, had moved up here. And I thought, wow, I could do this. And, there's a bunch of things I could do related to it, like podcasting and consulting and be near family. And so that's what I did a year and a half ago. And here I am.
And that's been going well for you?
Yeah, it's great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's challenging. I mean, it's like, it's interesting. Um, really being in control of my calendar every day, not being set by a school bell schedule
Yeah.
or, even when I was running, the nonprofit, the Bosnia campaign thing, like, there's certain things you kind of had to do and people were working for you and you didn't feel like you had that much control over time. But now it's like I've had to figure out like how do I organize my time better and what part of the day is better for being creative and what part of the day is better for doing the nuts and bolts stuff and then community. I've had built-in community often around shared values in every career that I've had before, right? In the State Department, everywhere I had a tour, there was usually a strong sense of community. The activism stuff, absolutely. And then teaching, unbelievable. And and now here I am. I'm in my home office all the time, talking through Zoom or whatever. And so, like, I've had to really work hard this year about trying to build and find community beyond my family. So, I'm now going to a yoga studio nearby, and I'm volunteering at a women's homeless shelter in Boston, and, trying to find other good people doing things that resonate with me and share the values. But it takes a lot of effort. That's a big adjustment.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. It's actually one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was this idea of community and how
Yeah.
do you create that and how do you foster it? So, as a coach, you're in this support role for a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? And I think as a teacher, you're in a support role for a lot of, as a diplomat, you were in a support role for a lot of people. Yeah, there's a theme that's kind of going across this arc for you.
Yeah.
And but I want to ask you, like, who do you rely on for support? Like, where do you get that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'd say that there have absolutely been times where that's been challenging because as a kid, the message from my parents was suck it up,
Hmm.
deal with your shit yourself. I was an only child and adopted, and and my parents were struggling, right? So they're always worrying about money and arguing about that and whatever. And then we moved in with my grandmother eventually, and so that was a whole other dynamic. And so that's a challenge for me, right? Is that I tend to be like, I'll handle it myself thing. I eventually, though, I'd say in the mid 90s, got introduced to therapy, and that was phenomenal. So there are times where, now I'm proactive. If I know, like, do you know what's going to hit the fan? There's going to be a transition or something coming up. I'll reach out to my therapist and be like, hey, we should talk and, figure out how I'm going to manage this thing. So that's been really helpful. Friends, I've really been fortunate in that I've had a great network of friends that I've collected in a way, or have collected me, maybe is better way of putting it, over the years. And we've kept in touch, whether it's from college, those guys are like my brothers, or grad school, or Moscow. We had a group of us that have remained very close. And my best friend from teaching, who actually created the program that I eventually ran, he's been like, you know, support, mentor, role model, inspiration, um, for me. And, and other people, mentors I've had, in various careers, like really powerful mentors who've been great, and colleagues. And then I'd say, it's interesting, I would say obviously like family too, though I think, like family dynamics are interesting, right?
Yeah.
They're complicated in some ways. So I've gotten support there as well, but also been in a supporting role. Um, I would say one of the interesting things, particularly getting older, but also I think that where I was a teacher made a difference with this. There was such a strong sense of community in the life school, right? The program that I was in, that, and there was this concept. My daughter was doing an internship in Mozambique. I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that, and living with friends of mine from the Foreign Service, or actually from the Bosnia stuff, and I went to visit for like 3 weeks, and my daughter and I went to South Africa a couple of times, and they've got this concept there. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Ubuntu, and it means I am because we are because I am. It's about the
Hmm.
interconnectedness of everyone,
Yeah.
right? I can't be happy, healthy, safe, etc., prosperous unless everybody else has the chance to do that, and everybody else can't unless I can, right?
Yep.
And so, which is not a very common attitude here, but I really loved it. I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it captured the essence of what it means to be human on this planet. And so I came back and I said to the kids in the program, I'm like, here's this concept. I want us to live this. I don't want us to talk about it all the time. I want us to embody this. And the kids really loved it. And it created this thing where, like, yeah, I was the director and I was supporting the kids and the other teachers, but they were supporting and loving me as well. And alumni still do it. And So I get a lot of love and support from alumni from that program that I keep in touch with, and even have one working for me now. And my daughter, I'm the father, but as adults, she helps and supports me, and so I think you know I go to Rosie's place, right, at this women's homeless shelter, and I'm volunteering, right, but I don't know. I feel like I'm getting more out of that than they are.
Yeah.
Like, it's feeds
Yeah.
my soul. So that's a long-winded answer, but like
No, I love that, and
everywhere.
thank you for kind of introducing me to that concept. It's so important, for in our society, in our culture, men are so often, like, told, "Be this rugged individual,"
Oh, yeah.
and it it just it's so antithetical to being human. Right?
Yes.
That to me, I think is like one of the root problems. And maybe if you go, you ask the five whys, the why, you get down to that why, and it's because we're not connected to one another, right? People's behavior kind of comes out of that not being connected to one another, not acknowledging that necessary connectedness.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, in the program, in the life school, with my friend John, who's running it at the, when I first went into it, like, we would talk about like one of our main jobs was to help the young men, the boys in the program become healthy adult men. Going counter to that kind of toxic masculinity, like, rugged individualism, suck it up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And one of the, I think, really powerful things that helped was when Brene Brown started doing her stuff publicly about vulnerability and authenticity,
Yeah.
because that gave us language to use with the kids,
That TED Talk changed my life. Like,
right?
literally
Oh,
changed my life. Yeah.
same, same,
Yeah.
right? And it's like all of a sudden, like someone turns the light on in the room, and you're like, "Holy crap! Yeah, I kind of had an idea, but not really. Like, now I see."
Yeah.
And
It gives you permission to open,
yes,
right? Yeah.
and almost like not just permission. I think in the end, it's like uh, a mandate or compulsion,
Yeah.
because
There's an insistence to it. Yeah.
you're gonna screw yourself over and deny yourself meaningful, authentic love and relationships in your life
Yeah.
if you can't be vulnerable and be authentic with the people around you. Like, holy crap. And yet like our society spends so much time and energy convincing boys never to do that.
Yeah.
And yet that, like you said,
And
it's like a core part of being human is we need that connection. We are connected energetically. We need like love, and in the end, like all the studies show that like our relationships, the quality of our relationships is what's going to define the quality of our life. And yet we're basically telling these boys like, don't do the one thing that is going to actually unlock those great relationships.
yeah, and I think there's this mischaracterization of vulnerability as not being strength, right?
Yeah.
It actually takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable.
Oh,
Like,
like a tremendous courage,
yeah, and that's
right?
yeah, exactly. And it's not just standing against this invisible foe and being this,
Right.
big giant man, it's about like having the courage to be yourself and to open up to people.
Well, it's this weird thing, right? Because like courage is another one of those things that's attached to masculinity often. And yet, like the brand of courage is often like in this modern day where in the United States, like we don't have a draft and where there's no saber-toothed tigers, whatever, we really teach these boys that like courage is about avoidance. Like,
Yeah.
don't do the things, right?
Yeah.
Avoid the vulnerability, avoid the signs of weakness, whatever. Instead of leaning into it and going like, no, real courage is confronting your fears and confronting your insecurities and taking chances, including being judged or rejected or whatever. Like that's what it requires.
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah.
lean into that stuff.
I used to be a scout leader, and one of the scouts once, I think, semi jokingly said, "I just take my feelings and shove them all down deep inside."
Oh my
And I was
god.
like, don't,
Oh my god.
please don't do that for the rest of your life.
Oh,
And yeah,
yeah, that
and
will come back to bite you.
yeah, exactly. So I, let's talk a little bit more about you. You mentioned several groups of friends that you have. I'd be interested to get your reflections on what role male friendship played in your life and like the connection that that brings you.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Um, I think it really, you know, I've always had both male and female friends. So for me, I don't think I ever felt um, like there was a part of me that wasn't being um, nurtured or supported in some way. And I think that with the collection of friends that I have, some fit some of the gender stereotypes, right? Like there are female friends who absolutely help bring out and validate and nurture and model for me the kind of like my feminine side, if you want to call it that, right? The softer side, the more empathetic, the emotional intelligence, whatever
Yeah.
we want to sort of stereotypically put with that identified gender. And then, I've got some guys who are like the good old boys, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of like trash talking, giving each other shit kind of thing. Talking about sports and all that. Um, but there's a lot, I think, particularly as time has gone on, and this is where I think maybe for my generation, it feels like some of this has gotten a little bit better in that even some of the like traditional like male relationship friends, there's been a greater willingness over time to be more vulnerable, to talk more about the difficult stuff that's going on in life, and support each other, and be more loving. And with some of the guys, it's hard to say I love you still.
Yeah.
I'll get I'll say, hey, I love you, and they'll be like, yeah, great, talk to you next time. But others have gotten to a point where they'll say it too,
Yeah.
and so that's been better. I think in terms of the male relationships in my life, I think I don't think in terms of like mentors, it's mattered very much between men and women. I think I've had really powerful, important mentors of both genders. I think I, I I think on the male side, it may be that I don't even know like how I would um, if there's like a special like role that they've played. That's really interesting. Um, I think it's more that maybe there's a initially a greater ability to gravitate. I think it's particularly maybe early on in college there was an ability to gravitate towards other guys because there wasn't the added layer of like courtship or like does she like me, does she think I'm into her,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
By the end of college, though, I mean, I just saw a month or two ago a group of friends of mine that I had not seen since college 40 years ago. And it was really the women in that group who were my senior year, like, a couple of them were like, they were my people.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think even by then it had started to evolve a bit. Um, So I don't know. I mean, I guess there's more bonding around some of the traditional stuff like sports. Maybe there's more of that, um, and and maybe there's a little bit in terms of uh, with the foreign service stuff. It was a more male dominated um, system at the time. In fact, there was a lawsuit about it. So I think my friends from there tend to be more men. But I don't know that there's like I honestly don't know if there's that big a difference for me in my life. Um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a real curiosity for me because I've had throughout my entire life my closest friends, like my deepest friends have been women, until the last decade.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
if I sort of analyze that really closely, I think it's because I had a insecurity-based competitiveness that was off the charts.
Wow.
And so I think with guys, I just was competitive by nature. I was trying to prove myself all the time, and
Interesting.
that doesn't create connection, right, at all.
Yeah.
And once I realized I was sort of doing that and can kind of deconstruct that, I've been able to have like really, really great, fulfilling relationships with other guys, which I've never had before. And I'm like, wow, I've been missing something, right? So there's something to that, I think. Um,
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I think for me, maybe one of the things that helped me was, I was like an outlier or outsider from early on as a kid. I got bullied and we moved a lot, so it was hard to, break into pre-existing friend groups and all that kind of stuff. So I tended to, I think, hang out some of the times with other people who were a little bit on the outside, right? And outliers and eccentrics, and so I think there was a bonding around that. There's a certain inherent vulnerability that when you all kind of know, like, we're not the cool guys and we're kind of bonding around
yeah,
that I think that kept to some extent it from becoming a competitive thing. And then I think in the foreign service and even the activism stuff, like, I think there's almost an inherent vulnerability there that you're taking these risks and putting yourself in vulnerable situations. You've got to trust each other. You've got to have each other's backs. So you can give each other shit and trash talk, whatever, but on the basketball court or whatever, like
yeah.
we all did. But in the end, like, you got to know that, like, we're doing serious shit here. And sometimes, like, lives are on this line, and I got to trust you and you got to trust me. And that was always there. So I think I'm lucky in that regard, and that I
That's
don't think it ever felt that way.
it's fascinating. You're the third of the episodes that I've recorded over the last couple of days, and there's been two threads that have been common in all three conversations. One is men who are using therapy to make themselves better, like to and like across the board, everyone has been doing that. And the other one has been men who have been in situations where trust was critical to
Mm,
survival. You and in the diplomatic service,
wow.
another person was military, and another person was a high altitude climber.
Wow.
And so, but that bond over necessary trust
Yeah.
is something that's really strong, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. 100%. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So let's switch up a little bit here.
Yeah.
I think that as we go through life, there are things that sort of we learn and become foundational for us. And then we hit another part of life and we realize we need to deconstruct that foundation in order to grow to be something more, to be something better. So can you talk a little bit about like any places in life where you found you needed to deconstruct what you had learned and to be able to move on to that next phase?
Yeah, um, I would say a couple of things. I would say every career change for me required that, because some of the core paradigms were so different. Now, I kept going back to that common thread of, like, I just need to figure out a way to make a difference. Like, in
Hmm.
the end, that has
Yeah.
to be the litmus test, big or small. But that was a constant self-talk thing, especially when other people were constantly, you know, kind of questioning my choice and suggesting that I was going to regret it or whatever. So, like, you know, I'm in the foreign service and it's about public service, right? And it's about making a difference, kind of on a big scale, but I was a small, like, cog in this bigger machine, right? But still part of something bigger. And then the activism thing, well, there it's like I'm publicly speaking out against the government, right? And I'm becoming the rebel in a way.
Yeah.
And and instead of the faceless bureaucrat, I'm now the guy on CNN. That was one of the biggest paradigm shifts, deconstructing and reconstructing my whole identity
Yeah.
professionally in a profound way. Um, So that was huge. And then at the end of that, we're like, we made a difference on something important. And I was kind of at the hub. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm going to be a high school teacher. And so then, people were like, aren't you going to miss Washington and being relevant and blah, 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 and all that stuff? And I'm like, I don't think so, because I was kind of burned out. But also, like, I did have to constantly train myself, even throughout the Bosnian stuff. I would constantly tell myself, I know this is unique. Nothing's ever going to come close to this on this level. I need to understand that and appreciate it and be present with it. But I also need to make sure that whenever this ends, I can't spend the rest of my life chasing this or comparing what comes next to this. That will be a trap and I'll be miserable. So I had to do a lot of constant self talk about I'm trying to make a difference, big or small, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I just want to
Yeah.
feel like I've got purpose and meaning and I'm helping somebody if it's one person. And so that took a lot of self talk. Then I think the other is um, marriage and divorce. And I've done that
Mm.
twice, which, in our society, that, it can have a big stigma. I mean, even though it's just, I'm divorced one more time than, than other people have been divorced once or whatever,
Yeah.
or been married one more time. But it does carry a stigma. But it also, I think, like, when we start and end relationships in general, particularly romantic relationships, that's momentous. Those things
Yes.
affect us
Yes,
every
they
kind
are.
of poorly.
I've been through it once, so yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think they challenge, if you're a reflective person, they challenge your identity and who you think you are and how you see yourself, and you've got to be willing to do the hard work to figure out, like, what you did well and where you screwed up, and and your role changes, right? I mean, I went from being single to being, a husband, and under really difficult circumstances for a lot of my first marriage, and then, we had kids. So then a parent, like, boy, having kids changes and deconstructs everything. And then particularly
Yeah.
becoming, a single parent, like being divorced and co-parenting with my ex-wife, like, that's a whole, like, talk about deconstruct. You got to, I mean, everybody in that relationship, the kids, the adults, individually to collectively, like, you're all deconstructing and reconstructing together.
Yeah.
But boy, that's challenging, right? And then I did it again, no kids from the second marriage, but with a second marriage, and with the complication of, like, okay, I got this new wife, but my kids who are here part of the time, and then her kid, and it challenges, like, everything, in terms of, again, how you see yourself, or how I saw myself, and how you define these roles and how you understand these roles, and when they come into conflict with one another, how do you manage that? And like, it really, like, makes your brain hurt, kind of stuff,
Yeah, it
right?
does. It
And
absolutely does.
your heart in the end. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you know. So
Yeah.
I think, like, all those, like, in some ways, this is it's kind of funny in a way. When COVID first hit, I had this epiphany that, um, I was I had decided that I was living in this beautiful lake house in Danbury, Connecticut, and I loved it, but it was too far from everyone and everything. And so I was going to sell the house and move into New York City. And so I'd had the place in the market, and the day after, we decided to go remote for the school because COVID had started. The day after that, I accepted an offer on my house. And then all of a sudden I was like, holy crap. Like, how is this all supposed to work? Like, how are we, how are they going to have an inspection of the house? Somebody's going to come into my
Yeah.
house. They might have COVID. And, how are we going to go to lawyers? And how am I going to move? And how am I going to look for a place in the city? Do I want to go into New York City when it's on lockdown? That's crazy. I can't even look at a place. I mean, it was all that. So I had this, like,
Yeah.
panic attack for like an hour. And then all of a sudden I was like, I got this. I'm the guy you want in a crisis. Crisis is my comfort zone. And I think it was a realization that, starting when I was a kid, and all the moving and all the turmoil there, and with everything, this foreign service, resignation, Bosnia, divorces, parenting, all that, like, the shit hits the fan, I'm your guy. Like,
Do
I
you find you struggle more when there isn't a crisis to solve?
100%. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had to work on that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
talk about my mindfulness practice is about being mindful and in the moment and, creating the joy and building community and what all those things that we've been talking about, like when everything's relatively calm, because
Yeah.
when things are in turmoil or there's a transition in life or whatever, I'm your guy. That's my comfort zone. I am mindful, I am in the moment, and I'm calm and I'm
Yeah.
thoughtful, and I'm the guy you want, the foxhole. But you know the rest of the time I gotta work at being that.
So what are those things that you're sort of working on currently as a person in personal development?
Yeah, I'd say mindfulness is constantly one, and it's funny, as a meditation teacher, I struggle with my meditation practice, absolutely, and so and I'm probably going to go to a silent meditation retreat at some point in the next couple of months, just because I feel like I need to step up that game and deepen it,
Yeah.
um, and so that's part of it. I, you know, I have been the learning curve on this business has been phenomenal, right? Challenging at times, but like I'm constantly learning, whether it's like new things I have to be able to do with the website because I manage my own website. And so, like,
Yeah.
how do you add in events and payments and, all that? So that's
Yeah.
going to be constantly learning. I listen to podcasts and read a lot. I've learning is like oxygen for me, and challenging my preconceptions and my assumptions and my beliefs and paradigms. Like I nothing is more exciting to me maybe than shifting a paradigm of mine. Like if I listen to a podcast or read a book and somebody shifts a paradigm of mine, I won't stop talking about it for 2 weeks.
Oh, I can so relate to that, and I think there's if I don't know if you're this way, but I can listen to a podcast for an hour on something that's a really engaging topic.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't make it 10 minutes reading about that same topic, right? There's something about this conversation that is just engaging. It makes it more accessible, and I think that's why I just heard a thing while listening to another podcast this morning that there are 600,000 podcasts now.
Wow.
And it's just this
Wow.
way. I think it's because people really connect with conversation
Yeah.
rather than a one-way stream of information.
Yeah. No, I think you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for me, they've been a real gift. And I think there are other things. I mean, I think I think the volunteering, that's part of my own kind of growth and learning. I think, going back to in-person yoga is part of that too. I think it's about like, how do I learn how to build or rebuild a sense of community for myself, and how do I stretch myself professionally in new and different ways. The marketing stuff, it never felt comfortable to me, and so there's been a real like having to lean into that and embrace it and shift some paradigms about that. That's been huge, and that's been through podcasts and conversations I've had with people who, my daughter's best friend from high school runs a social media marketing company. So her podcast and talking to her has been really
Yeah.
helpful. And, it's constant, but I feel like the way I think about it, and I do this in coaching clients too, is that like, you know, all the different aspects of our life need to be nurtured and cared for. If you neglect one of them, it's going to start to infect the others. It's kind of like Ubuntu within yourself. And so if you're not nurturing your spirituality, that's going to come back and bite you on the butt. If you're not taking care of your body, that's going to come back and bite you on the butt, right? Like professionally, relationships, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
So like there is a part of me that's kind of constantly, and even if you look at like my podcast, or I always have 3 or 4 books going, I'm consciously or subconsciously, I'm trying to hit and nurture these
Yeah.
different aspects of me so that I'm kind of moving forward. Because I used to tell this to kids, like we either grow or we rot. There's no staying the same. There's no
Yeah.
status quo. So if you think like, yeah, I'm just good the way I am, it's like I can smell you festering. Like
Yeah.
it's not good,
It's like
right?
I get bored so easily. I can't imagine not growing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
So let's switch into our lightning round,
Great.
where I'm going to throw 11 questions at you, just
Oh, I can't wait.
quick answers.
I can't wait.
So, what are your top three values?
Top three values: integrity, uh, compassion, and love.
Excellent. Who is one role model you've had in your life?
Oh, I'd say one would be my best friend, John. He's been a role model for me as a human being, as a teacher, as a dad, as a leader, in every way. He's amazing. And he's the best concierge ever.
Who do you hope you are a role model for?
Um, anyone who needs it. Like, I
Hmm.
think, like, I think it's less about, like, in that regard, it's less about me and it's more about, that's why I do this stuff. It's like, I just want to be out there so that whoever, like, in a world of 8 billion people, there's got to be a bunch of people that like I would resonate with. Okay, them. Help them find me.
Yes. There's so many people that say, I don't have anything. No one wants to listen to what I have to say. There's 8 billion people out there. There's somebody that can learn from you,
There's
right? Help,
somebody.
help them. Put yourself out
Yeah,
there to
yeah,
help
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, what's one way you make the world a better place for others?
Um, I've heard this from students of mine and past students. I um, I think I help people feel loved and validated and understood and seen.
Okay. What is the hardest thing about being you in today's world?
Um, I think two things. One is that, there's that fine line between having empathy and compassion and taking on the burdens and emotional weight of the situation or people that you care about. And so this is a world that's full of that. And then um, I think the other part is feeling like um, someone who wants to make a difference in a world where people are, particularly in this country, people are becoming more calcified and polarized, and so it feels more often like you're preaching to the choir rather than having a conversation amongst a diverse group of people. And I think that's part of what I'm hoping to do with a lot of my work right now is hopefully, you know get people to be a little bit more open to being loving and empathetic and seeking to understand rather than judge and dig in your heels, but it's hard. Like, this is a tough time. It's not like,
Yeah,
you
yeah, it
know
is.
we've had other times where it would have been easier to be me.
Yeah. What's your favorite emotion?
uh Wonderment or awe,
Hmm.
like that, like the universe. It's like,
Yeah.
what?
Yep.
Like,
Yeah. I was just sharing with somebody the other day that the more I learn about the world, the more I believe in the divine.
oh, that's interesting.
Right. Because it's so amazing. Like it doesn't seem accidental, I guess is
Yeah, yeah,
my,
yeah.
yeah.
I can see that. I think for
Yeah.
me, it just makes me feel more like, holy crap, there's no end to it or
Yeah.
learning about it, like,
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah. What's
Yeah.
your least favorite emotion?
Anxiety.
Hmm. What brings you the most joy in life?
I would say it's my kids and like being with them no matter what is going on. That's it. That's the center of my universe. And then uh, being on the water. It's like my soul soars.
Hmm. Where on the water do you go?
Well, I live a block off of it, so I'm looking at it right now.
Okay.
So that's part of it. And then uh, um, every February, my cousin's up here and I go down to Florida to visit our cousins down there, and they live on the water and have boats, and we're just out in the boats every day. And it's like, can I just freeze time?
Yeah. Awesome. What makes you most proud of yourself?
That I'm trying to make a difference. And it ends up being a selfish thing in the end too, right? Because
Hmm.
it's what brings meaning and purpose and joy, and connection. But like, and I think that, and that I do try to learn and grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You may have hinted at this already, but where can you feel the most yourself?
That's interesting because I've thought about that a lot, because I I think I'm a pretty authentic person, but I feel like there are like pieces of it that get seen in different situations or by different people. Um, I'd say two things. I would say um, I feel it when I'm in a flow state with other people. Like when
Mm.
you are just connected. I felt this teaching and working with kids one on one, and I feel it, with some of my friends and family, and like at moments, but it's like these moments, like when you're in a flow state with other people. I feel it with clients, right? And you're just like connected, and you're in this, and the energies connect like that. That.
It's when your purpose is activated.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's it,
Yeah.
100%. But it's that
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the energy's just like,
Yeah.
it's just wow.
Okay. So let's wrap up with one final question. What's the one thing you hope people take away from this conversation?
That that we're here to that we're the interconnectedness, Ubuntu, that we're all connected, and everything in the universe is connected energetically on some level, right? Quantum,
Yeah.
physics and all, and but that we are, and that we've got to take care of ourselves, and we've got to take care of each other, and we're here to be love. I love the Ram Dass quote. Like, a couple of my epiphanies along the way were like, oh, the Beatles were right. It is all about love. All you need is love. And then it was like, no, Ram Dass is right. We're here to be love,
Mm.
not to
Yes.
possess, right?
Yes.
Be loving energy. And that, to me, like, if you can understand after this that like we're all connected and we're here to just be love and make things better for each other, like, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I've learned a lot from this conversation. It's been great getting to know you a little bit. So keep up the great work that you're doing, and I wish you the best going forward.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. You're such a wonderful person to have a conversation with, and really thoughtful questions. And I love the premise of the podcast. So I wish you the best of luck with that too.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Bye. You can learn more about Illuminate at illuminate.substack.com. We are also streaming on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you at the next episode of Illuminate.